Hello and welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie. I'm beginning to really love talking to you every week about all the kinds of things that I hope will help us to better understand the history of how we humans got here, what life is about, and what we can expect as humanity continues its evolution into the next frontier of its existence. All through the week, I'm keeping my eyes open for topics to talk about. In order to do this, I often draw from the ancient philosophers, from the variety of religions and other spiritual sources, and also from science, from world events, and even the news cycle or random whispered speculation from time to time as well. But as I travel through the week planning my next episode with you, I also think about my own life and the things that I've seen in my past that provide the context for everything that's happening around me. Because I'm human, just like everyone else, and what I'm experiencing in life, even if it differs here and there from your life, is also going to be the same as your life in lots of ways. We just don't know what we might have in common. Each of us is living a life of our own. We spend two-thirds of our life or thereabouts awake, and a third of our life is commonly spent asleep. What we do in our lives in the two-thirds of the time that we're awake and active and working and eating and chatting with friends or taking care of chores, well, this is an aspect of our life that is unique to us. It's often based on our job requirements or our personal preferences or whatever else society dictates to us here on earth. But in that one third that we're asleep, each of us is experiencing something outside of our job requirements or outside of our personal preferences or our family commitments or whatever it is that society dictates to us here on earth. And there are those of us, in fact, maybe all of us, who in one way or another, whether we remember later or not, well, we're dreaming our way through that one third of our 24-hour day cycle, all the way through that night as we're sleeping. I should add, obviously, that some of us are sleeping our way through the day because not everyone lives in the same night-day cycle. But what we do have in common, however, is the fact that we are not actually in control while we're sleeping. But our dreams are still happening, and they're often happening to all of us in a very similar way, regardless of our age or gender or our socio-economic position in the world, our geographic location, or the manner in which we live our lives, or the things that we believe about reality. That's what we have in common. So we all dream, right? Some of us remember our dreams. Some of us barely ever remember our dreams, but we all dream nonetheless. Why? Why do we dream? Let's take a look at this question of why we dream and the relevance that dreaming has on our lives, because I think there's a lot for us to get to know better about an aspect of our lives that we don't often talk about. So let's start this off with the icky, boring stuff and look at the official explanation of dreams. And by official, I mean the scientific explanations, from the experts. Okay. Dreaming generally falls into the category of neuroscience, which is the scientific study of the nervous system and the brain. Neuroscience has 7 overall theories about dreaming that I've arranged in order of commonality and agreement. So the most commonly agreed theory by scientists is the first one I'm describing, and each one following that is lesser and lesser when it comes to how it's regarded by the scientists, until we get to the 6th and 7th, which are considered by neuroscientists to be a little fringier. The first theory is the theory of activation synthesis. It was first proposed by scientists by the name of J. Allen Hobson and Robert McCarley, and it relates to the idea that dreams are caused by random neurological activity that occurs once we reach the rapid eye movement or REM stage of sleep. During REM sleep, the brain stem is said to activate areas of our brain that deal with emotions and vision. This produces a series of visual stimuli that impact our emotions, leading us to automatically respond to them as though they're happening in real life, just as we would if we were awake and had to deal with something that was occurring around us. What happens under this theory is that our mind tries to deal with these random signals by weaving them into some kind of a narrative that we can understand, that in turn allows our emotions to understand and then, of course, respond to that stimuli. Under this theory, dreams do not serve a purpose. They are just simply random stimuli. And our sleeping bodies, in particular our brain, just processes that stimuli as it would when we are awake, without considering whether the visuals or emotions in the dream are logical or not. It's like an auto response. This theory doesn't really attempt to explain dreams that I've had in my life that appeared to be warnings or predictions or that help me to make important decisions in my life, because I've had those kinds of dreams quite a lot in my life, but that's okay. The scientists love this theory, and it's just the first theory. So let's see what else they've got. The second neuroscientific theory is called memory consolidation. Basically, this theory involves the brain sifting through things that have happened while we were awake and reorganizing everything we've experienced into new categories. The purpose of doing this is to reinforce important messages from the day and to discard and file away information that we don't really need to remember. I don't really have an issue with this theory, but it does make me wonder about some of my memories from childhood. I mean, for example, I can remember this is probably my first memory. I can remember my mother grabbing me by the diaper when I was about 1 year old. I can't remember why she did it, but I know why. But I definitely remember that she did do it. She actually explained why she did it because she remembered it as well. Apparently, on that day, I was crawling about on the floor, and when she turned around for a second, I quickly made my way to the top of a staircase and was just about to fall down the stairs when she saw me. So she grabbed me quickly by whatever she could reach, and what she could reach was the diaper. And so she did that to stop me from falling down the stairs. Yep. It was a typical naughty baby moment. I also remember a couple of years later when I was 3 years old, watching the moon landing on television. I was sitting on the bare floorboards in the living room and playing with candy that in Australia is called Smarties. I'm not sure if Smarties are just an Australian thing or not, but they're a little bit like M&Ms, but were around much longer than M&Ms were. They're little chocolatey drops covered in different colored coatings. And I was playing with all the different colors on the floor. And I remember the TV talking about the men on the moon. So I can remember a flash of a moment from when I was 1 year old. And I can remember something pretty significant in history from when I was 3 years old. But I'm afraid no matter how hard I try, I can't remember anything that I learned in school. Honestly, I can't remember one fact from even one lesson from any of the classes that I took at school all the way up until the end of high school. So, why would my dreams reorganize my memories and decide that the diaper incident was more important for me to remember than my schooling? Maybe it has something to do with how my memories are interpreted, or how our memories are interpreted by us emotionally. And that kind of leads me to the next scientific theory. So, neuroscientists have a third theory that our dreams are where we process our emotions. Dreams often provoke strong emotions. I can definitely vouch for that. I've had a few dreams over the years where someone in my dream upset me, and I woke up feeling angry about them, and I may have been angry all day. I've also had a few dreams where I woke up feeling sad because, something in my dream was horrible. I don't know, like my dog got lost or was hit by a car or something like that in my dream. According to scientists, the act of replaying scenarios that provoke our emotions in our dreams, well, that's a way for our brain to learn how to regulate our emotions. During the dream, the brain has to create coping strategies and provide emotional responses to deal with whatever occurs in the dream. Yeah, it's not doing a very good job, in my view, if that's the case. Anyway, in a similar way, science also has a fourth theory that dreams provide opportunities for problem solving and creativity. This theory is based on the idea that when we're asleep, we're in a relaxed state which allows our brain to explore new ideas and creative solutions to things that we need to deal with in our waking hours. We aren't bound by whatever rules we would normally impose on ourselves while we're awake, and we aren't distracted by other things. So I guess it's a bit like when you try to remember a word and you just can't for as long as you're really trying to remember it until you stop thinking about it. And then later in the day, when it's the last thing on your mind, the word that you were looking for just pops into your head. So, this theory also sort of reminds me of that saying, the one that goes, when you have a problem, you should just sleep on it and the solution will become apparent in the morning. It does seem to often be that way. So, even though this is one of the fringier theories, I have to admit it rings true for me in lots of ways. The fifth theory, and weirdly, this makes it one of the more fringier theories by being the fifth, is the Sigmund Freud theory. It's called the psychoanalytic theory, but it originated from Sigmund Freud. This theory is that our dreams are actually code for our hidden desires and inner conflicts. Freud divided dreams into two different types of content. There's the manifest content, which is literally the storyline of the dream. And then there's the latent content, which is the underlying symbolic meaning of the dream. So basically, according to this Freud theory, everything we dream, everything we dream about, is really an expression in code of something we desire or which is causing us a sense of conflict in our lives. I guess this is where the dream interpretation resources come in. What does it mean when we dream of flying? Or what if we dream that our teeth are falling out? That kind of thing. These are two very common types of dreams that people have, and they're considered to be symbols of something completely unrelated to flying or teeth that are happening in our lives. I'll only mention the sixth and seventh theories briefly because I didn't really find them very interesting, to be honest. The sixth theory is centered around the area of the brain called the thalamus and how it generates rhythmic activity that oscillates and may cause random dream experiences. The seventh theory proposes that we dream because we're evolutionarily designed to survive, and the dreams give us opportunities to practice surviving, some kind of random threat in a realm that doesn't have any real world risk for us. That just sounds like a cop out to me. So, dreaming in this final theory is a simulation of life to help us to learn how to survive when we're living our real lives. Okay, so that was science, done and dusted. But I'm not sure if science has been able to explain the different kinds of dreams that people have. For example, I can think of 4 to 5 different types of dreams, all of them different from each other. And I would expect that each of the different kinds of dreams would serve a unique purpose, don't you think? So I do believe that we can have emotional dreams. I agree with that because maybe something is causing us stress during the day, or maybe we just ate too much cheese before bedtime. And for me, that's what causes nightmares or emotional dreams for me. I don't often eat cheese right before bed, but if I do, let's just say I had a lot of cheese, like in a few slices of really cheesy pizza or something, then I'm almost guaranteed to get a nightmare that night or a highly emotional dream. As it happens, thankfully, I'm not a big cheese eater, so I don't have to worry about getting the nightmares very often. Okay. I would agree that there are such things as problem solving dreams. I've had those myself. I've had a dilemma and then I'd sleep on it and the answer comes in a dream. Or I wake up instantly knowing how to fix the dilemma that I had the night before. I've also had dreams that are warning me to change something in my life. For example, to eat healthier or to save some money for a rainy day. Things like that. I remember years ago, actually, when I got a little bit of money from a settlement, I was trying to decide what to do with that money. Should I put a deposit on a small flat? Should I open a little business like a restaurant or something, or go to university in America? That night was the first time I had ever gone to bed asking for a dilemma to be resolved about what was the best course of action for me to take. And that night, I had a dream that I was taking off in a large aeroplane. When I woke up, I knew that the dream was telling me to go to university in America. And so I did. And that decision was one that changed the entire course of my life. I still look back on that decision as being one of the best decisions I ever made in my life because of how much I learned about myself, my life, and just the world in general. Neither of the other two options would have opened my mind up quite so much or given me as much as I got from my experiences of living in different countries, the first of which was America. And then there are the dreams that seem to be predictive or prophetic by nature. It could be something small, like dreaming of a friend you haven't spoken to in years. And then the next day, that very same friend calls you on the phone just to see how you're doing. Or even weirder, dreaming of a friend you haven't spoken to in years. And then the next day, you get a call from someone who tells you that the friend in your dream has just died. Or dreaming of a friend, and the next day they tell you that they dreamt about you on the very same night that you dreamt about them. All of these things happen. So here are a few examples of dreams that I've had recently that science doesn't seem to have a theory for. I dreamt that a work colleague got into a fight, and the next day he called me to say that he and his friends were jumped by a gang of young men after leaving a nightclub. How did I manage to dream this on the very same night that it happened? And just a few weeks ago, I woke up with the sensation of having just uploaded a whole bunch of information, like I was a computer and something was being loaded into my database. And also, just a few weeks ago, I dreamt of a voice that told me to be part of the future and that they will always be there for me. The voice sounded like a choir of women, and apparently that multi-layered voice that sounds like a choir is also the same manner of speaking that some experiences of celestial or extraterrestrial beings claim that they hear when they hear a voice. And what about things like dream paralysis, where you seem to wake up from sleep and for a moment, or maybe even a bit longer than a moment, you can't move your body. And if you try to speak, there are no words and you just can't find your voice. And what about that fuzzy period of time just before waking up when you're neither asleep nor awake? It's at that moment that many people, many people, have experienced some of the most profound and unexplained experiences of their life. Is there more to dreaming than what we can see in the science theories? There's got to be more to dreaming than just a bunch of dry scientific theories about REM and oscillation and compartmentalizing memories and stuff like that. But as usual, the science world has picked up a lot of knowledge, but it doesn't really tell us what so many of us really want to know. One of my favorite ways to interpret the dream world actually comes from the Australian Aboriginal culture. The Aboriginals in Australia are the oldest surviving civilization, with physical evidence tracing them back beyond 40,000 years. One of their most significant cultural beliefs is that of the dreaming, which is also often called dream time. You may have heard the phrase Aboriginal dream time at some point in your life, but let's get deeper into it to see whether we can understand it a little better. So the dreaming or dream time refers to a time when the world was created by ancestral beings who shaped the land, the rivers, the mountains, and all living things. These beings are often depicted as animals or human-like figures with special powers. The story of creation of the world and of humanity and of life varies among different indigenous Australian groups. But the central theme remains consistent, and that is that powerful ancestral beings continue to shape the world all the way to today. For Indigenous Australians, the dreaming is not merely a myth or a story, it's a way of life. They believe that everything in the world is interconnected, and the spiritual realm is as real as the physical realm. The dreaming provides a framework for understanding these connections and living in harmony with the natural world. The dreaming is also very closely tied to the earth and its landscape of natural greenery and mountains and rockery, and all of the elements, but also all of the animals, including humans, that inhabit the earth. The Aborigines consider the land or consider the earth to be a living entity that has within it spiritual powers. Every living creature holds a significance, and that's its importance. It's required to respect the land and to live as one with everything because humanity is connected to everything that exists. There's pretty much nothing that the Aboriginal Dreamtime belief and that science have in common at all. The Aboriginal Dreamtime consists of a series of narratives that are passed on from generation to generation by tribal elders and in person. And the reason for that is to be able to preserve the cultural knowledge and ensure that it's continuously transmitted to future generations. The purpose for telling these stories about the dreaming or dream time is not to entertain people, it's to preserve the spiritual beliefs and the sense of interconnectedness of humanity to all of the world and the universe and everything in existence. Just like that Kabbalistic book that I bring up from time to time called the Zohar, which is almost impossible to understand if you read it word for word. But the meaning of the Zohar is imparted from person to person, from elder onto people who are learning. And the purpose of the continuous transmission of the story of the dreaming is the same. It's for the recipient of the information to feel the truth, to feel it, rather than to learn the truth in a studenty kind of a way. A student sits passively learning information that may or may not resonate within them. But when a person learns to feel the essence of new information, it becomes a part of them, a part of their life force, and they carry it with them forever. And just like the knowledge of the book of Zohar, the Aboriginal Dreamtime knowledge is meant to transform the spirit of the person receiving the wisdom. And that's the reason why it's told rather than written. The dreaming is not merely a story of creation. It's actually a guidance for life, providing teachings about kinship and spirituality and the connection between people and the land and everything else that exists upon or above or below that land. The dreaming is woven into every aspect of Indigenous Australian culture and has been passed down through hundreds, or dare I say thousands, of generations. It's passed down through oral storytelling and songs and artistry in particular traditional Aboriginal paintings. Let's get a little deeper. What is the creation story that fits within the Aboriginal dream time? And how does it relate to the kind of dreaming that we do when we're asleep? Okay, so well, according to the dreaming, the world was shaped, as I said, by ancestral beings who traveled across the land, creating the mountains and the rivers and other natural features of Earth. In Australia, each of the geographical features that appear in Dreamtime storytelling has a specific story of its own associated with the overarching spiritual nature of Dreamtime. This includes one of Australia's most iconic natural features, which is commonly known internationally, I think, as Ayers Rock. But recently, out of respect for Aboriginal tradition, it's more frequently referred to as Uluru, which is the Indigenous translation for the Dreamtime of the monolithic sandstone rock as having been positioned at the centre of Australia's landscape for the purpose of time stamping the early acts of creation by the very first Indigenous ancestors. Another commonly referred to Dreamtime geographic element is the watering holes or watering hole that is often described. Water holes are considered to be spiritual realms that allow direct communication between humans and their ancestors. And another feature is referred to as song lines, which are intricate ponds that naturally sort of crisscross the land, connecting a number of significant sites to each other, that the Indigenous Australians refer to as songline paths. As reinforcing the connection of each location to the other, it's part of a cultural memory of events that took place in the ancient generational lives of the Aboriginal people. What I find particularly beautiful is the manner in which the indigenous Australians connect their tradition of dream time and its related philosophies to the act of dreaming while we're sleeping. In Aboriginal belief, dreams are not merely random occurrences that happen during sleep. They are seen to be a continuation of the dreaming or of dream time, which is a way for individuals to connect with the ancestral beings that created life on Earth and to receive guidance from those ancestors. When an Aboriginal person dreams, they believe that their spirit is temporarily leaving their body and entering the dream time. This allows them to communicate with their ancestors, receive messages, and gain important insight. Within the Dreamtime tradition, symbols that appear in dreams are considered to carry very deep meaning. An individual's dreams may reveal personal guidance, warnings, or instructions related to their life journey. There is so much to learn about the Indigenous Australian tradition, including the ceremonies and rituals that surround their ancestral beliefs, and the manner in which Dreamtime art is brought to life with dot paintings. Also, bark art and rock engravings. There are, in fact, many similarities between the traditional Aboriginal belief system and that of the ancient Egyptian belief system, despite the vast distances in time and space between the two cultures. It almost seems as though the truth of creation and our reality was the actual truth back in ancient Egyptian days, and that was the case with the early Australian inhabitants as well, and that the early Indigenous Australians have continued to survive and therefore continue to carry the traditional beliefs from thousands of years ago, as many as 40 plus thousand or more years ago, despite the fact that the Egyptian civilizations experienced circumstances that caused them to struggle to survive, sometimes even get destroyed. And of course, because of that, they've had to rebuild into new societies that may have lost some of the ancestral connection to what had once been the universal truth throughout the earth. It's a bit like the ancient civilizations across the world knew where they had come from and the truth about reality, and that those civilizations that have survived still know that, despite the fact that some of the others across the world, say, for example, the people from the civilization of Atlantis, had somehow lost their knowledge due to disasters that destroyed those civilizations. Somehow I feel more closely connected to the Aboriginal Dreamtime theory than I do to any of the scientific theories. It's not that the scientific theories aren't accurate. I'm sure that they are, and they're accurate from an empirical, proven, tangible perspective. But I think it's important to note that even if you know the mechanics of how something works, which is what science is all about, that doesn't mean you know why something works. And so you don't really understand it. You don't understand anything about anything. And that includes understanding, anything about your dreams, unless you know why you're dreaming. The mechanical nature of a dream and what your neurons are doing and what the physical actions of the brain are, these are all very well and good, but they're only describing the process of a dream. And that just isn't quite enough for me. I want more. So here's an analogy. Have you ever tried to find a birthday gift for someone you've never met? It's one of the most stressful life experiences, don't you think? You have no idea where to begin looking for this silly gift because you don't know anything about the person to be able to figure out if they will enjoy the gift or think it's bland or ridiculous or maybe even offensive. I don't know. It may not be in keeping with their beliefs and their way of life, or it might appear to be overly generous, which is kind of weird, or really cheap and stingy, which is kind of weird too. But when you take the time to truly understand a person, when you've invested yourself enough to really pay attention to what makes them tick and what they love about life and what tends to get them down and the things that they naturally gravitate towards, the colors and textures and, their favorite pastimes and things they already own or have proudly got on display in their home. Well, then you begin to understand the person and you appreciate them for their unique qualities. If you've been taking the time to look outside of your egotistical issues of cost or image or preference, you will suddenly find the perfect gift, and it'll just seem to appear in your consciousness as if from nowhere. You might be walking down the street and suddenly see something in a shop window that sings to you, and it sings, this is the perfect gift to give that person. In Western culture, it is considered that a person is ungrateful if they don't automatically fawn over having received a gift. And yes, we should be grateful if we receive, but regardless of what the gift is, really. And what if, upon opening the gift, you can immediately see that it was nothing more than a superficial, disingenuous way of ticking the box of giving a gift, and that no thought about you was put into the choosing of the gift at all by the person who had bought it for you. In that particular instance, fawning over the gift, yeah, it strokes the ego of the person who gave you the gift. And so, really, you're the one giving them the gift, aren't you? Whilst they are the one who has giving you something to stick in the back of your closet or to donate to a charity or maybe even throw away when they're not looking. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little bit weird here. I do have to admit that I'm a really great gift giver. I'm known for it in every country I've ever lived in. When I give someone a gift, I just seem to have a knack for knowing exactly what they might like. Sometimes it takes money, but most of the time it doesn't. What I try to do is I try to get to know that person as well as I can, and I pay attention to who they are, and then I set my own ego aside as I begin to choose that perfect gift. I'm not a big gift giver. I don't just hand out gifts all willy nilly, because I like everything in my life to be meaningful. But when I do, it always comes from the heart. And I don't mean my heart. I always try to find the other person's heart. And that's where the gift comes from. At least I do my best to make it that way. That's a little bit like how I feel about the scientific theories surrounding dreams, as opposed to the traditional beliefs about dreams that we see in ancient cultures, like that of the indigenous Australians. It is so beautiful to think that we are connected to our ancestors forever through the entire duration of our lives and beyond, and that all we have to do is to go to sleep in order to reconnect with those ancestors and learn from their wisdom. It gives me a deep sense of reassurance knowing that we are not alone in this world. We're in the company of our elders, our guardians, who are here beside us in everything we experience in our lives. All we need to do is accept this as our truth, and immediately we can experience the warmth and comfort of knowing that we are part of an eternal tribe of enduring, endless humanity. But in order to live this way with this kind of belief system, we have to set aside our own egotistical expectations, just like when we're choosing a gift. We have to remain open to endless possibilities of what is and what might be. It's the closed mindedness and the undue focus on ego based desires for success and wealth and recognition, and empirical this and perfect that, which causes humanity to slip into a mindset that disconnects us from the humble but deeply powerful nature of our past. All of life's wisdoms are there in abundance, they're in our dreams. All we need to do is take down our ego based blindfolds. So there is a neuroscientist that I can call by name, and part of this he actually agrees with. His name is Dr. Raul Jandile, and he's a neurosurgeon, a neuroscientist, and an internationally acclaimed best-selling author on matters relating to the brain, cognitive function, and some of the more subtle, nuanced aspects of our existence that provide an intangible quality of how we understand ourselves as humans. He believes that our primary purpose for sleeping, and that is the number one reason why we sleep, is to dream. Because dreaming is what sustains our connection to the existence of life and reality. And we need to dream in order to survive as a species. Dr. Jandal says that it doesn't matter whether we remember having dreamt something or not. Either way, when we sleep, we dream. We might remember, we might not, but either way, it's happening. And that brings me to the theory that I think may gain some traction in the future as humanity becomes more and more open to new kinds of knowledge outside of only that which is material and tangible by nature. So, the way that Dr. Jen Dial describes it, humans tend to live a pretty standardized existence. We wake up, we go to work or school, and we live a pretty uneventful life of repeated, limited experiences, even the most exciting of us. And so our waking life is contained to what we know. And if we were to compare our brain and our intellectual or imaginative abilities to something like the muscles in our body, then our way of living life doesn't really create any new muscle because we tend to live a life that doesn't change very much and it doesn't test us in new ways very often. So the intellectual or imaginative muscles of our brain don't expand or stretch. Therefore, the process of dreaming is like going to the gym and really testing out our muscles so that they can expand and stretch and reach improved ranges of strength and flexibility. According to Dr. Jandile, when we dream, those dreams are pretty illogical by waking standards. We can fly, we get chased by monsters, we encounter situations that we wouldn't normally see in our waking lives. We might have fascinating, complex conversations with brilliant people that we ordinarily wouldn't get to know in real life. Or we might appear in our dreams as a character who can play musical instruments. Or discover new mathematical theories, or save the world, or jump as high as a 10-story building. We might even write a novel in a day or any other number of superhuman things. What the dream is doing is it's teaching us that there is more out there in life than what we're exposed to in our everyday existence. That's what the doctor believes. And although it sounds like it might actually be the whole point of a dream, and I like the idea in a way, I still think it's not quite capturing everything that might be happening to us when we're sleeping and dreaming. It's obviously important for science to stick to scientific explanations, and I'm grateful to people like Dr. Raul Jandile, who who finds a way to use the tangible, provable aspects of science theory to explain things that can't be proven by scientific methods. But I still think that this idea opens the door to the truth, possibly being even more closely related to what the Aboriginal Australians believe. I think that what Dr. Jandile is really confirming to us, whether that is his intention or not, is that there is much more to life and humanity's existence here on Earth than what we are exposed to in our material daily experiences of reality. And that dreams are the portal or the doorway that links our limited material existence to an intangible spiritual existence that is guided by our ancestors or perhaps even otherworldly beings. One thing Dr. Jandile says that I believe is even more supportive of the idea of something outside of the material realm assisting us with our life's purpose through our dreams is probably not exactly what he intended me to get from his message, but anyway, but I think it actually helps to prove that we aren't alone and that our dreams are evidence of that. I recall him saying in a recent interview that I've seen, that I saw of him, where he said that people who are dying of chronic illnesses, such as cancer, for example, they have a very high frequency of recalling end of life dreams that are really comforting for them. In fact, the closer that that person gets to dying, the more comforting their dreams will be about end of life. They might dream about reaching the end of a cul-de-sac in their car or watching the end of a lovely film in the cinema and thinking about how much they've enjoyed watching it, or something else that symbolizes the end of something. But when they do have that dream, they wake up feeling reassured and comforted by the general vibe of the dream. You know, that actually reminds me of a dream that I had a few years ago, which wasn't about my end of life, but it was about my cat's end of life. At the time, I had no idea that my cat was unwell. She had been acting a little weird, meowing in the middle of the night here and there, and it seemed as though she might be getting a bit forgetful, but she was elderly, so I didn't think much about it. But as it happens, she was suffering seizures, which I didn't know about until after I had my dream. My cat was part feral, officially, the vet had told me, and she wasn't a very affectionate cat because she had feral tendencies. She wasn't affectionate at all. She was probably more likely to injure you than cuddle you. And then if she did see blood, that's when she'd start purring in satisfaction of the damage that she'd caused because she was pretty ruthless. But in my dream, she was cuddling me at a shopping mall, a food court of a shopping mall. And I don't know what the relevance was of that. Maybe she just loved food and she loved the food that I gave her. I don't know. But I was holding her and she was actively cuddling me and telling me in a human kind of voice all the reasons why she loved me. I remember it was a beautiful, comforting dream. And I told my YouTube subscribers this in a video the very next day. It was only a few days after the dream that I discovered that my cat was experiencing seizures. I then saw a shadow of my cat pass by my chair as I was doing a video live one day. It wasn't her, it was like a shadow of her. She was actually asleep in another room at the time. I think her seizures were causing her life force to shift in and out of this reality or something, because very rapidly the dream and the shadow sighting got my attention. She died within 2 weeks of that. So I know that my dream about her death was sort of prophetic. She was making sure I knew that all these years she had really loved me, even when she was acting like a little scratchy monster. Scratchy, bitey monster. So, although science officially says that they believe our brains make up messages and that we don't get those messages from an external source, I think they might be jumping the gun a bit on that one. How does science explain dreams that are predictive about something like someone's death? I think there's still evidence here that dreams are a kind of portal to something beyond our current understanding. For me, at least, this makes sense. I'm not saying it's exactly like this because, I'm not the expert, but it makes more sense than to say that dreaming is like exercising a muscle. When we dream, we're not shutting off our brain or any of our organs. There is a phenomenon referred to as sleep paralysis, which is when you wake up from sleep and in the first few moments you may not be able to move or speak. This is a phenomenon that indicates that some of our muscles and other deliberate functions may be temporarily switched off during REM sleep to allow us to better receive dream messaging. And as we progress into being fully awake, any slowness of waking up, those functions would eventually be restored. But the organs, such as the kidneys, the brain, the heart, the liver, things like that, they don't switch off. They continue to operate during the night, all during sleep. They are, in fact, optimized during sleep because they don't have to compete with running and talking and tapping away at our mobile phones or eating or anything else that might get in the way of our reconnection to something greater. In fact, I believe that is something that science has proven. They have actually run electoral nodes on the brain, and they've been able to see that the electrical current traveling through the brain is twice as active during sleep than it is during waking hours. So while you're awake, your brain is asleep, and while you're asleep, your brain is awake. And so that's what I think about dreaming. I think it's a reconnection to something greater than ourselves, like hooking into or hardwiring back into the motherboard after spending the day using up our Wi Fi capability, likening it to having a cell phone that's programmed to not update itself or not update its operating system until it's plugged into an electrical socket. After spending the entire day unplugged and sitting in our pocket, the cell phone is using up its energy and doing what it does on a normal day, letting us check our social media, make and receive calls, check the internet for info on the weather or the news or the nearest restaurant that delivers Indian or whatever. But as hard as it works and as brilliant as it is, there's more to the cell phone that it can't access until it's plugged into the wall socket and gets updated. I think that's what dreaming is. It's when humanity gets plugged back into its source and receives its reality updates. If this is it, then the next question is, where are the updates coming from? What is it that helps us to solve a dilemma in our sleep or predict that someone might call us tomorrow or see a friend get into a fight 50 miles away on the same night that it's actually happening? What is informing us of the updated info that we receive in our dreams? You know, the indigenous cultures of the world are often seen to be inferior to, us pretty suave and, sciencey kind of modern people, because they don't get dressed up in Calvin Klein or speak the lingo they learnt at Harvard, or they don't get huge government funds for their work, or they don't organize committees with logos and business mission statements and things like that. These are the things that appear to give credibility to a theory here on Earth. And yes, some of the ways in which the Aboriginal traditional stories surrounding Dreamtime and other cultural beliefs seem quaint and illogical and maybe even infantile to someone who doesn't understand. But that's not because they aren't true. It's just that the stories are often told with the use of highly stylized symbols that need to be interpreted in the context of how the indigenous tribes lived their lives. When a tribal elder says that an ancestor came to him as a massive bird or a yellow tree, he's not being literal. He's using metaphors of the past that held significance to the people who collectively use those metaphors as the basis for their language and experience of the world around them. But because we don't understand or use that language now, we dismiss it as though it doesn't hold any relevance or any truth for us. Perhaps it does hold the truth. And perhaps we're just disconnected from that truth. It may not be scientifically sound as a theory, but I think it's always wise to keep our minds open to what the indigenous cultures say about the origins of life and how the world works. Anyway, I try to keep my mind open to any number of possibilities. I try not to judge. And although I don't walk around expecting to see an ancestor or an alien or a celestial being suddenly appear, be nice, I do remain open to the idea of all of that happening, even if I can't see it. Because if it was as cut and dry as science says, then all of it would be revealed by now, but it isn't. It's still a mystery. And that proves to me that there is still more that we probably can't discover strictly through science. I love the idea of being in the guardianship of my ancestors. The wisdom to be found there is inexhaustible, and the sense of infinity that comes from the whole concept of connecting with the past is very calming and reassuring. It means that nothing really ends. Nobody is really lost or dead. And life, along with all that it has to give, is somehow eternal. Finally, seeing as we're talking about dreams today, why don't we dip into the topic of lucid dreaming very briefly? It doesn't need much. A lucid dream is when you know that you're dreaming while you're asleep. During a lucid dream, you're aware that the events unfolding in your mind probably aren't real. Alternatively, though, there's also the theory that lucid dreaming can include a form of astral projection, which means an out-of-body kind of experience. It's like you're directing a movie in your sleep, and in some cases, lucid dreaming allows you to control how the movie unfolds. Some of the characteristics of a lucid dream include having an awareness of the fact that you're in a dream state. Also, you have control to be able to influence your dream's course of or its direction of travel. And lucid dreaming may not be as common as other forms of dreams, but this depends on the person. And with practice, you can actually improve your likelihood of having a lucid dream. The best time to have a lucid dream is either in that fuzzy point of time between wakefulness and sleep, or in that fuzzy point of time between sleep and reawakening. I'm not an expert on lucid dreaming specifically, but I am aware of methods that can be used to increase your potential for experiencing a lucid dream. And it's kind of fun. The very first step, is to make sure that you are relaxed, maybe lying on your back like a corpse-like pose, but any way that you're comfortable. You need to empty your mind and focus on relaxing your body. One muscle group at a time is a great way to do it. Try to feel the sensation of gazing into the blackness of your closed eyes. And just prior to falling asleep, you're likely to experience, those fleeting images, like little flashes and sensations of things that are very faint, that sometimes you see inside your eyelids. Just little flashes that appear just before you fall asleep. At the point of experiencing those sensations, remain still and calm, but begin to visualize a scene that you'd like your dream to begin in. Alternatively, you could also imagine that you're floating outside of your body as if you're leaving it behind. This could encourage an out of body experience, such as an astral projection. Initiating a lucid dream may seem as though it's very difficult to do. However, once you've practiced sufficiently, it is something that can be achieved relatively easily. There are also a number of natural supplements, better known for assisting in improving your chances for lucid dreaming. However, I am definitely not the person to recommend any of these by name. Okay, not on this show. This is something you'd need to figure out through other resources. Do an internet search or something like that. I have a feeling that if I start recommending supplements to people, somehow I'm going to get myself into trouble over here. So, I'm going to stay out of that one. But they do exist. And from what I understand, these kinds of supplements are they're just ordinary over-the-counter vitamins, but they happen to have that kind of a side effect, or they help in that way. So we're not talking about anything particularly dangerous. Of course, another very simple but really helpful thing that you can do that will help you to remember your dreams and also learn to control your dreams is to keep a dream journal. I do this myself, but I don't write in a journal because I feel that by the time I've, sat up in bed after being asleep and found a pen and a pad and turned the lights on so that I could see what I was writing, by that time I've woken up too much and the dream is probably already half forgotten or gone from my memory. Instead, what I do is I just keep my mobile phone next to the bed, and when I wake up immediately after having had a dream that I want to remember, I record my exact recollection in the moment into my mobile phone. And then I just go back to sleep, and I've spent basically no time energizing myself sufficiently to properly wake up. And so what might actually happen in that instance is I might end up continuing on with that same dream once I've fallen asleep. This has been known to happen quite a number of times, and this is something that I do regularly. Dreaming may very well be a major part of our past and our present and our future, all coming together to demonstrate that life is eternal. And if that is the case, then our dreams are a knowledge base of what's to come. Next time you're dreaming, think about where that dream might have come from. Who did it come from? And what might the hidden messages be inside your dream? Is your dream a warning, a sign of what you should do, a decision to be made, a person to reconnect with, a new idea, or perhaps even a clue about the future? And yep, that's why I'm Ellie Dreams Down Under, because I do love a good dream. If you'd like to know more about what I do, then visit me at Ellie Dreams Down Under on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Patreon, and Shopify. Just look for Ellie Dreams Down Under or visit my YouTube channel for all of my social media links. And don't forget to check out Patreon for extra content on today's topic and a wide variety of ad-free videos. Thanks to everyone who's joining me today on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms. If you're thinking about becoming a member of the KGRA community so that you can chat with like-minded folk during any of KGRA's video broadcasts, remember to use the promo code ELLIE, that's me, to get 30% off your subscription. That's it for today. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.